Welcome to the Smart Betting Club podcast. I'm your host, Peter Ling. Now, this episode is effectively part 2 of our focus on the 5 stages of profitable betting, and it's a special members-only pod that will be available behind the SBC member paywall. Part 1 of the 5 stages of profitable betting podcast is freely available to download and listen. And if you haven't heard that one yet, I would recommend doing so first of all prior to this one, just so that everything we talk about in today's part 2 makes a bit more sense. So assuming you have heard part 1, then in this episode, we are going to go into greater detail for you as an SBC member with some specifics on the tipsters, tools and information to use at each of the 5 stages. It's the first members-only podcast we have ever done, and it will allow myself and my guests to discuss in great detail some specific member-only content, reviews, tipsters, tools, and information to help with your betting. Speaking of guests, it's about time I introduce my SBC colleagues to the pod. I'm going to start with the Midlands' third biggest punter, at least that I know of, Josh Holloway. Welcome back, Josh. How are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you, Pete. Who are the top 2?
Yeah, beat me too.
I knew you'd ask me that. I'm going to put Tom Brownlee in there.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Yeah, and Nick Goff. I believe they're both from the Black Country or the Midlands at least.
I think Nick is from Wolverhampton. I think he lives somewhere by Epsom now, if I've read correctly or remember from his interviews on Betting People. Yeah. I know lots more punters a lot more than me, so yeah.
You're in esteemed company anyway, Josh. Wow.
Very much so. In my old shop, there was someone who used to, I'm pretty sure he covered every single horse from across the day's race and in different lucky 63s. So I'd say he was ahead of me as well. We'll put him, I'll be in at number 4.
Okay, well, that's another pod entirely. People that we know that are good at punting.
Yeah.
And you can hear him there in the background. It's Cheshire cricketing legend, and I'm not sure where he stands in the Cheshire punting order. It's Rowan Day. How are you, Rowan?
Yeah, that is the best introduction I think I've ever had to anything. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm all good. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really well. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to this pod. I know we recorded the first one last week and we'll put these out together. But being the first members only one, I feel like we can really sink our teeth into some really good meaty topics about the tipsters and the tools we follow. And what I thought, gents, to start off with, and what we didn't do initially, and I wanted to say for this, is a brief guide to what each of us does betting-wise, the stages we are at and why we do what we do. So I'll start off with myself. So obviously I'm, extensive, experienced bettor, and I do a decent amount of stuff, what I call stage 5, which is pinnacle and sharp bookmaker. And I continue to build that up. And that obviously is something that's scalable. And I feel that will be my long-term usage of betting. But right now I have a lot of stage 3 stuff where I've got soft bookmaker access and I'm hitting that as hard as I can, all within the context of a suitable betting bank, etc. All the advice that we provide. The reason for this, I've got some contacts and networks back in the UK which allow me to bet with these soft firms. And also I live abroad, so I have access to a lot of Ontario-based soft bookmakers, many of whom aren't as clued up as perhaps European or more experienced bookmakers. So there's a lot there that I can use. So I'm using them to make good bankroll growth, but with the mindset of, well, it's not going to last forever. But then I have the stage 5 betting, which the bankroll I make from stage 3 stuff will help inform. So that's my perspective. We're all going to be slightly different. I'll say as well, for context, I could be I don't want to blow my own trumpet. I probably could rely on my betting income, but I prefer not to. Like, it's one thing to make money betting. It's another thing to rely on it. And I enjoy doing SBC. I enjoy running Smart Betting Club. And a lot of the time, the things that I review and advocate, I use myself or inform as my own betting. So one feeds the other. So that's my situation perspective. Gents, which one of you wants to jump in next?
So I'd count myself as an experienced bettor too. I've been through the various stages that we're going to discuss, and I'm very firmly now totally immersed in stage 5, which is really about going out into the great wide world, away from the laptop and putting bets on using cash. I know I say it tongue in cheek, but I've just employed my first runner, who happens to be my son, but that is the first step on something that I want to and aim to grow and continue to develop. Like Pete, I don't rely completely on betting earnings. I work full time as well, which presents its own challenges. But I guess that shows too that it's very possible to have a full-time job and generate a very healthy income from betting too. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to give a bit of an insight into that final stage. Sadly, my days of using the soft bookmakers are well and truly gone now. I guess there's always the opportunity perhaps to take a couple of steps back and opportunities to start using some soft bookmaker accounts as we move forward. But 80% of my betting at least is done in shops, and the other 20% very much on the exchanges. So that's my focus now.
Mm-hmm. Really good, and very different as well to the shops. And I think that'll be useful to get into as we go along. Josh, how about yourself?
Yeah, I was looking through these stages. I think a bit of a mix. So probably quite similar to you, Pete. Some stage 3 stuff. A lot of my betting turnover is personal, so that'll be on horse racing. I'd say 80% on exchanges. I do get bits and bobs down on restricted accounts. In terms of the sports, I'd say 60% horses, maybe more than that actually. 70% horses, 20% golf, and 10% football would be the breakdown. In terms of how it kind of makes up my income, I've actually dipped into relying on it as my full-time income for about 18 months, and that was before I started doing work for the SBC. But I really like the balance I've got at the moment, so I like doing the work at the SBC, obviously learning all the time by reviewing all these services and reading what they get up to, and obviously networking, meeting people, and I find it really interesting, so it's very suitable for what I'm doing alongside my betting. So yeah, I'd say a mixture, 3, 4, probably a little bit to 5 as well. Like Rowan said, those accounts that you could get anything down on are long gone.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But and for what your listener will gauge from this, we've all got access to the same information, just like SPC members do, but we're all approaching it slightly differently. Just because, and that's an important point I would like to make ahead of getting into this, is our circumstances, preferences are going to be different. Whether it be full-time job, whether it be what we can bet in terms of the accounts and exposure to other countries or exchanges or whatever's available to you. So if you're listening from all around the world and you have access to different firms and different opportunities, then it will be different for you as well. But it might also be because of your family, work life, whatever it is. So I've always been keen not to make SBC about one person's betting, because be it myself, be it Josh or Rowan, just because we're all going to be slightly different. So if I say I follow one prescribed strategy or set of tipsters, it won't work for everybody. So that's important to state as well. So don't feel like you have to copy anyone. Just take as much information and find out what works for you. And so let's get into some of the actual tipsters. Now, beginner stage, none of us are that stage, but we have been through there. We've all been along this pathway, so we have experience about what we're talking about. The beginners, the key things from the first podcast: keep things affordable. If you're new to it all, take things quite slowly. Try and test out what you like and see what suits you from a risk and time perspective. And I think here we have, I'll start off with some of the free tipsters we've got available. You follow a few of these quite regularly, don't you, Josh? So we've got like 80-20 racing, achievable value, Kieran Ward on the racing side of it, because some of them are bet for SP as well. They're nice and easy to follow, aren't they?
Yeah, I've actually broken 80-20 racing and achievable value in my notes down into 2 parts. So they're actually designed to be followed at Betfair starting price, win only. But what you will find when you're looking at services like that, because of wisdom of the crowd, and winners will generally shorten in price before they go off, these are very viable to be used with bookmaker accounts too. So especially if you've got facilities for maybe best odds guaranteed, or you've got the facility to spread your bets around, you could bet these earlier on in the morning. They don't get released till 10, 11 o'clock, both of them. So you're not going to get big restrictions for placing early bets. You can bet with those at bookmakers and you'll be absolutely fine. Just for reference, what I did after I spoke to the gentleman who runs Achievable Value, I actually said to him, what I'm going to do is split my stakes across when tips are first released and at BSP, at Betfair starting price. So that's what I've been doing from the start, and I've got a positive record at the moment. I normally play in the morning markets on Betfair, and then I put half my stake towards close to the R4 at Betfair starting price as well. They're both very good for that.
Mm-hmm. And there's a few more, isn't there? I know we're just about to publish a review of Betting Experts Value Angle Strategy, and then there's some others like Darryl Carter who we're tracking at the moment, Andy Holding, and some of those do need to be, you have to be aware they're free tipsters, so sometimes prices might get piled on and might not be available, and obviously we'll publish reviews in the future or coming up. But there are some good options out there which are free tipsters, even just to familiarise yourself with how tipsters work, learn about the different types of bets that come up, what each way means.
Yeah, 2 stand out in particular. Andy Holding, who works for Odds Checker, and then Hugh Taylor, who's at the races. Both of them are excellent judges. They've got really good long-term records. There are problems with them though. So both release their tips relatively early in the day. So Andy Holding, I think, is at 9 o'clock. Hugh Taylor around the same. And what you will find with them is prices will crash immediately. There'll be people sitting there pressing refresh. And if you do take the prices and you manage to get them, that's going to be something that bookmakers are not going to be too happy with. So you do have to be mindful of them. Darryl Carter and Andrew Mount, both of them who proved to be very popular in the recent SBC Awards, they actually released their tips the night before. So we have got some analysis coming up on them about when's best to take the prices. It might be the case that you can wait till mid-morning or at the off and get good prices on their selections. Very similar to Stephen Harris as well, a betting expert. So he does a review the night before. He'll have a best bet and a value angle. So 2 horses for the upcoming racing. We're also proofing his as well, aren't we, Pete? So we'll be able to have quite a detailed record of how his tips perform. Yeah, there's plenty out there that are free. Absolutely loads of them.
There was one that really caught my eye as well. On the SBC website, under the free tipster section there is Kieran Ward. I mean, Kieran's got a track record covering many, many years, hasn't he, now? And has produced a fantastic, consistent ROI figure around the 10% mark for all of those years and over many thousands of bets. Now, I know that the Kieran Ward 13-2 to 8-1 bets are free to access for members, aren't they? And to have a resource like that, I think, with no charge involved, that sounds like a deal of a century to me.
Well, I mean, nice advert for the service, but it is good. You're right, actually. It is. They are good and they're there. I think the prop's not as sexy as some other ones because they've been around for so long. People may have tried it for a month. And if you look at the record, you can easily go a month or 2 without making much. Your strike rate's quite low because of the price of the service, of the bets that I put forward. But long term, it's got the angle there and it definitely is profitable. So there's several there on the racing side. I would just put forward as well, a couple on the golf. There's Ben Coley, who we all know about. There's a few others that SBC that Tour Tips was one that we've published a review of, who are free of charge. Mm-hmm. And there's also there's Niall Lyons, who writes for Odds Checker, we're tracking at the moment, and Steve Palmer, who writes for the Racing Post. Now, the two that I would advocate, obviously Ben and Tour Tips. You've got to be careful with these, just with some of the racing ones, because what you'll find with a lot of these free tipsters, they're free because they want eyeballs, they want clicks. So they'll put their bets up early into the market for that reason. So because it has the longest amount of time for people to view them. So Ben will put his bets for golf on a Monday evening and a Tuesday morning. Now, the market then is quite weak, and you'll find, because he's a good tipster, people are piling on the prices. So, you can follow him in, absolutely, and there is some exchange angles there. It's just something to be aware of. Tour Tips, however, doesn't have the same profile. For whatever reason, they're not as well known, despite our publishing a podcast with them and reviewing them and find them quite favourable. And so I've used them myself as a free tipster. Just because they're free doesn't mean you shouldn't use them, even if you're a big staker, and found them to be particularly good. They also pick out bets at kind of the sweet spot, I think, between about 25, 20 to 1 to about 66, 80 to 1, which is where the big value wins on the PGA Tour especially come from. Yeah. You're gonna go a long time between drinks backing them at 200 to 1, hoping for winners. So that's good. And I'd also advocate, chaps, I don't know if you know any other ones, but Matchday Profits is a really good bank builder style service. They'll put up free bets and ACCAs and things to take advantage of deals and offers and just some shrewd bets. And we've reviewed them in the past. They're not going to make you tons and tons of cash, but it's a really good bankroll building type of service. Low risk from somebody that's proven to make it pay for a long period of time. So at this stage, it's about getting used to things and learning some of the good behaviors and building your bank. And I think some of those services we talked about are some good examples of that. Gents, any more from the stage one that I might not have considered?
Matchday Profits is football, isn't it, Pete?
It is, yeah.
One more to note there. Again, he's free. Mark O'Hare. So he writes quite widely. He's got his own service, which he does charge for, but he writes for Sporting Life, Odds Checker, and I believe he writes elsewhere. For Matchbook as well, of course, because he does a podcast there. He's quite a good service for someone to follow to start with. You will need bookmaker accounts to get the value because he's normally betting around even money. So if he's advising at 11 to 10, you don't want to be taking 10 to 11. You want to be on the right side of evens if he's advising that. But he's probably a good service for someone who's starting out, gives really good explanations for his bets. Yeah, and generally good all-round advice from across the UK and Europe. He has lots of European bets.
Yeah, and I would suggest as well, good rule of thumb, if you're following free tipsters when the prices have moved, if their ROI is 20%, you don't want to be taking significantly lower than that in terms of difference in odds.
Yeah.
So you can use that as a barometer. If prices have moved and you don't have the backup of knowing how they perform at Betfair SP or Betfair, then that's something to bear in mind. So, just because if Ben Coley's put up a bet at 100 to 1, it's now 50, I wouldn't take it at 50. There's a very, very high chance that's not value anymore.
Yeah.
but it might be at 90-1, for example. So those are things to bear in mind. So moving on to stage 2, which is like the next stage with the builders. So at this point, you'll hopefully have a good sense of how the tipping world works, some of the disciplines that you need, like patience, discipline, bankroll management, psychology, understanding sequences, all those things. And you might look to be thinking, well, I made a little bit of cash. I understand how it works. I'm going to try and spend some money. And this is where there's like a balance between paying for the really high ticket services, which perhaps suit people a bit further on, but paying for a service that actually allows you to have maybe a membership cap and where they advise bets later in the day and they're from a proven expert. So there's a long list I've got in front of me here, like some good Hall of Fame or premium services. Gents, just jump in if there's any that you wish to talk about from that, your experience of using them. Is there any from that list that you've got some experience of?
So I'm currently following Edward's Tips, for example, which covers golf and snooker. Now, so far, I've been following that since the turn of the year. And so far, I've been concentrating on the outright golf tips that Craig gives out. But it's interesting, I've been watching the snooker, and that's just my natural cautious approach coming through. I always just like to get a feel for things, and before I jump in with both feet, just see how it works. But it all seems very, very straightforward, and I certainly intend to introduce the snooker betting to what I do as well in the very near future. The golf has been performing very well, and again, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to write up the review of the service not so long ago, and clearly Craig's got a big edge in both sports. And I like the fact there are two sports, but we talked a little bit about diversification in the previous podcast, didn't we? And within one service here, you've got two completely different sports with completely different markets. And Craig makes the point himself that it's not unusual at all for, say, the snooker, the short price snooker bets to be covering the longer losing runs and the losses you're getting from the golf. And then suddenly you get a couple of big long price golf winners when the snooker perhaps has a little bit of downturn in form. But I like the fact it levels out the ride a little bit. And the other one I'm currently following is weekly golf value, which I think for anybody at this stage is a fantastic service to follow, simply because it's very low intensity in terms of the amount of work and time you need to dedicate to following. Tips come through around Wednesday lunchtime each week, usually 8 golfers to follow in the main PGA and the DP World Tour events, the LIV when there is one. So it's very easy to get on. Prices hold up extremely well. And again, it's got an exceptionally strong track record over the years. And although and we'll come on to this a little later, although I'm using the Bookie Bashing Golf Tracker as well, and that is where the weekly golf value bets are derived from, I see no reason why not just to follow them blindly, getting the prices. Why not? It's a really good resource. So those are the two that I'm currently following from a list of services that are good bank builders.
I'd add to this a couple of points to that. Edward's Tips is good because it's golf, obviously, and does outrights, but he also does top 20s, top 40s, top 10s. So it spreads out from beyond just taking on the top 5 or whatever it is, win market requirements. So it spreads the risk out there. Weekly golf value as well. I follow them. I use the tracker myself, and I like to think I want to cover the weekly golf value options because I know Tom, or sometimes Duncan, who runs it, they also look at other metrics. Their graph that they publish every Wednesday illustrates that about their golf, whether it be the type of course and who it suits. So there's a little bit more than just, sometimes they don't just look at the tracker, they look at other things. So I use them, but I would put forward a couple more for golf. There's Plus EV Golf, which is very good. There's an exchange and win-only strategy for that, Hall of Fame rating. A golf betting club, which probably will get that rating soon. They're very good as well. They do in-play. There's a few options there. And then there's a bunch of racing ones too. Josh, you probably know, you're probably more of the racing expert. I do less and less racing betting these days for various reasons, but like No Photo Needed, Northern Monkey Punter, there've been a couple there, but there's plenty of others in there. I know you follow Optimum Racing and as well, don't you? So
just one little addition to weekly golf value, if I can. One thing that I would be very impressed with if I was at this stage is the range of bookmakers they use. So you're not reliant on using Sky Bet or Bet365. They put up loads of options, so you can bet with like Virgin Bets, Barone Racing is one of them, Poker Star Sports. So they're covering so many bookmakers that you can find that value across loads of different sources. So they're a brilliant service for stage 2.
If I could just jump in there as well, just from personal experience, that absolutely spot on with what you say there, but also there are bookmakers, and again, something we've touched on before, sort of the smaller independent bookmakers that the SPC has done a lot of work on collating information for. They often offering good prices on the weekly golf value bets, just as good as on the grid of bookmakers that they quote from, and similar place terms as well. So if you're prepared to do a little bit of digging and insight into some of those smaller bookmakers that are offering those prices, as a really good avenue there to, even at the very least, spread out your bets from the Bet365 and the Sky Bets with those smaller firms too, to help keep your accounts for longer. But I thought, yeah, that's a really good point you make there about weekly golf value.
I direct people to look at our page for that. So we've got the major bookmakers page where we've profiled each of those bookmakers and how they're related. So, for example, if you're looking at the odds checker grid and you can see QuimBet's prices, what you'll find is FafaBet, Bet Goodwin, Bet 600, they will have identical prices with identical place terms. So there's a bit of a shortcut there, and it's well worth signing up to as many bookmakers as you can, as we previously mentioned. Definitely a good service.
I jump in there as well and say, for people who live abroad and different bookmakers are available to you, it's well worth using things like the golf tracker. We're going to get into a bit more, but things like that you can relate to see where value also works with the bookmakers you have. I know this from looking at bookmakers abroad. I have regularly found exceptional value just by taking a look at what's value, how the terms match, and bookmakers that aren't on the tracker because they're abroad or they're not picked up for whatever reason, mainly because they're outside the UK. But, or it might be in shops, for example, you might find that too. But you can find value through that. So that's more of a stage 4 or 5, like when you start to find other ways and means of getting your bets on. But certainly there are things to consider if you listen to this from, I had a gentleman from, I think, South Africa talking about some of the options he had, and someone from Australia. And I think there was a few places that some punters were picking out value that I'd never heard of. So just to add a little bit of insight there.
If I could just add one more to the stage 2, because I wish I'd known about this service when I was at stage 2, and that would be no photo needed. So run by an industry insider. It's absolutely excellent historical results, finds value, and bets come through mid-morning, so you're not going to get restricted placing them the night before or any of that. Absolutely brilliant service, excellent historical record, and keeps on finding the winners at very good prices. Very good staking plan as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you're after. You're after a service which is tipping up affordably, is not too expensive, but also is tipping up at a time where you can get on and you can build your bankroll. I'd also say Northern Monkey is very good as well. I know he has his ups and downs, but he is very good, a real knowledgeable racing expert. And premium boxing tips for diversification. There's a lot of boxing accumulators or parlays, as he would term them, at short odds, and they've got also a very good record and quite affordable. So there's a few others that we could probably talk about there, but obviously the Hall of Fame and the premium service, they're all listed, and you'll be able to find quite a few of those services that we mentioned and more by exploring that. So it's probably the biggest amount of options at that stage. But then we get into stage 3, and this is where you are less concerned about restrictions. Well, you are concerned about it, but what you're concerned about is making as much as you can. And this is the stage where perhaps your bankroll is at its highest for soft bookmakers. And you're going to be taking, perhaps you're willing to pay a little bit more for subscription fees. And you might be finding services that are betting on the nose, and you might be diversifying as much as you can. And this is a really good stage for bankroll growth. And you'll often find yourself dipping back into this if you find bookmakers that are offering open to you, soft bookmakers especially. I would say like services we haven't talked about yet, like Learn, Bet, Win. That is a fantastic service, a racing service with a superb record. We recently re-reviewed them at SBC. We've been following them for, I think, almost like a decade now. And Declan, who runs the service, is just the most knowledgeable racing judge out there. And it was a pleasure to talk to him on a podcast as well to ask about that. But he consistently wins week in, week out. Now, obviously, you're going to lose accounts following him, but you're going to be following somebody that does churn through a very good profit. I'd also put in System Analyst, another recently reviewed SBC service, which also has the ability to blend into the exchanges if your bookmaker accounts go. Optimum Racing also is very good, isn't it, Josh? Talk to a little bit about anything I've missed on the horse racing side there.
This stage, from what I understand, we're talking about a blend between bookmaker accounts and starting to use exchanges as well. If I could just revisit achievable value in 80/20 for one sec, because it's a bit different at this stage. I have spoken to one of our members who lives in Australia, and what he's found with achievable value, playing in the pre-race markets, you can make lots of money on top of what the standard profits would be just by placing your bets just before the race goes off. I think what I said earlier would apply to both achievable value and 80/20, where you want to be looking at the closer to the off because there's going to be lots of liquidity and you'll be able to get good money down and beat bookmaker prices even. So they're good services for this stage. You mentioned Optimum Racing there. Obviously, Andrew Lowry, I'd say I don't know the better chase racing expert in the country, really. Historical record between 20 to 25%, return on investment year in, year out. What I found with his service, you can easily get the prices that he puts up. So they're not sensitive to steaming in. What you'll also find there is you'll be able to match it on the exchanges. So when he has a 6-1 winner, I'm quite regularly getting 9-1, 10-1 on the exchanges. And you're looking at 3-place markets, you'll be able to get the price there too. So yeah, Optimum Racing is excellent for this level of betting, along with those two that I mentioned. I'd say those three are excellent for racing at this stage.
And Rowan, I want to know about your shop strategy. This is where it starts to really kick in, because you're doing coupons, you're doing golf, you're doing some football as well.
Yeah.
This is where you're really hitting it hard, aren't you?
Yeah, so this is using the various trackers and that are offered by Bookie Bashing primarily. So the Lucky 15s taken from the racing tracker. I did worry before I started, because I thought, well, okay, with work commitments, I'm only likely to be able to get out to get to the shops during lunchtime. But I'm finding plenty of value horses on the tracker available at between 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's not been an issue. We've got the golf tracker that we've touched upon. So it's interesting. You mentioned a little while ago, Pete, the weekly metric graphs that Tom and Duncan use, looking at course form and various other elements that might point your way in certain golfers' directions. So I'll back those wherever I can to in the shops if I can find them at value odds on the golf tracker itself. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's not as easy as just sitting in front of your laptop and opening up an account and sticking your money on there, and it's all done within seconds. You've got to get in the car and drive along. And I don't just go to one bookmaker either. I have to spread out just as you would with online accounts. You've got to be very wary of catching the attention, and if you just keep hitting one shop all the time. So I've got a number of bookmakers within reach that I'll use on a rotational basis.
We need to buy you a wig, Rowan.
So that's the next step. That is the next step. I need to perhaps a different accent or something.
Yeah. Also blends into stage 4 and 5, this doesn't it, as well? Perhaps I jumped ahead a little bit there, but it's also something that you can do, in shops.
Yes.
Which would be a stage 4.
You can, because you can. So with the football coupons, for example, we know that there's a limit, and the limits are in the review that we produce for the football coupons. So, for example, in the Betfred, there's what they call a permission to lay limit. So if you put on a bet of a certain amount, I think it's just under 300 quid in some shops, 275 in some shops. In the experience I'm having is that above that, the shop staff are obliged to call through to the traders. You're drawing attention to yourself, but you stay within that limit. Then, as long as you're not taking the mickey with what you're trying to do, certainly so far I've not experienced any difficulties at all in getting on. And of course, that's just at one shop. So if you really wanted to stake big, then you can go to various different shops in different areas and put essentially the same bets on. Same with the Lucky 15s. It's just about being a little bit savvy in terms of what you do. Just appreciate that you still don't want to stand out from the crowd too much. You still want us to be somebody that they see and welcome into the shops, and not somebody that they, as soon as they see you walk through the door, regard you with suspicion and think that you're going to take them for everything they've got. That's what it's all about. So there are challenges, but easily manageable ones.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's definitely options for punters to get on, things to consider about the liabilities and how shop staff treat you, and how to be aware of what pressures they might be under. If I could chuck in a few more here for the stage 3 as well, I would suggest for bankroll growth, winner odds is superb. I've used that myself, bet extensively on tennis. Obviously, it's a soft bookmaker, really focused service. You can get some on with Pinnacle, although the odds move significantly. With them, you often find with Pinnacle, you'll get bets from winner odds when they rebound. So let's say they put up a value price on a player, plunges in, and then for whatever reason, someone decides, the market decides that, those odds have moved too much and it rebounds back out. You can find them, but generally it's for soft bookmakers. But as Josh was alluding to, you'll find lots of the smaller firms that you might not be familiar with do still offer bets on tennis, and just as they might do on golf and most other sports, to be honest. And so there are more options there when you're at this bankroll stage to go, right, I've been closed down by these 5 firms, but there's another 25 that I can use. And just because I don't see them advertised on my TV, or there's no shops for them, or they're not well-known brands, it doesn't matter. They are... Okay, yes, you do have to make sure that, they are licensed, for example, and they're not some... Go check the independent guys. There's a couple that even are licensed aren't worth wasting your time with a Quinn bet would be one, wouldn't it, Josh? I know you're thinking the same as me.
We've had a few run-ins, haven't we?
We have. Well, we haven't ourselves because we decided to take our own advice and not try and bet with them. Well, I have anyway, and I'm not going to bother. But most of those firms are going to, be legitimate and get bets on. So they're definitely options for winner odds. And if you're using that service, it's exceptional. I would say Quentin Franks, I know he's a member of the SBC Premium, and he's very good as well because he's from a win-only perspective. So it's more a service that, obviously, we have a membership cap, and it's slightly more expensive for that reason. And it's only for bookmakers because we don't want exchanges to take the value as they used to prior to joining SBC. And it's working very well on that basis. But it's win only, so you need to have patience. And I do come across some people who join the service and don't understand sequences or how losing runs can happen. I think it was last Friday where I think he had a 33 to 1 winner, a 10 to 1 winner, maybe a 12 to 1 winner, all in one day, all in the space of about an hour.
Yeah.
And then prior to that, you could happily go on a losing run of 30 on the bounce, but you've made all that back and some more, and you're probably above the ROI that you'd expect. But how many people did finish? There's a couple of people that quit too soon. So stage 1, stage 2, as well as giving you education on who to follow and what to do, they also educate you on how to handle losing runs and why even the best tipsters have them. That's something we haven't really focused on yet, but it's a really important aspect of this journey. So if you just jump to stage 3 with a big bankroll and you don't know what to expect or how to handle that, you're going to lose a lot of money potentially, far more than if you'd have just started very small and learn. You don't have the pressure of losing large sums of money. You don't make rash decisions. So if you're starting at stage 1 and you're putting a £2 bet on versus a £200 bet, you're not as under pressure if you go 20, 30 bets without winning, or you have that 5th bet that's done in a photo. So there are things to consider. There's quite a lot of tipsters at this stage. It's probably the most available to you because price isn't a big concern at this point. Probably the biggest concern is losing your accounts. But by the time you lose them, especially with all the options, you then can use that to move on to stage 4 and stage 5, which probably blend together here because effectively stage 5 is just having a bigger bankroll and you've got no soft bookmaker accounts. And most of us are doing a lot at this particular junction. And some of it overlaps with what we've already talked about. So, with Systems Analyst, for example, which I recently reviewed, it's got exceptional profits at Betfair, but probably one of the key points at this stage, it's not as easy. So you have to think about the market. You might have to take a bet earlier. You might have to watch it. So you can't just go and place that bet with a bookmaker at each way terms. Let's say, for example, golf, you might have to go and request a price. You might have to go and, look at the market, wait for the market, work out what's value, what isn't. But it's likely to be worth it at this stage because, well, if you're working to a big bankroll, it's very profitable. Guys, what are your thoughts at stage 4 and stage 5 about the differences between the earlier stages and things that you need to consider?
Can I just add one little note in, please, Pete?
Please.
You mentioned there about when you've used up 5 bookmakers and you want to use the next 25, stuff like that. What I found with this, I think you might have had the same experiences. You'll hit some roadblocks if you try to use them all at the same time. So I'm happy to offer advice to anybody who wants to get in touch about maybe what sequence to open accounts in and which ones to open alongside each other and which ones not to. Because I've been stung a few times by restrictions on those extra accounts. So just thought I'd mention that if anyone's thinking about using the ones that maybe aren't listed on Oddschecker.
So what you're saying there effectively is the sharing information. Now, what we don't know, Josh, is the fact whether they are sharing them because they're in some way connected or whether it's being shared privately. And this probably also goes to shops, doesn't it, Rowan, about CCTV?
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw some of the comments on that from, I think, Luke Payton. And my experience, I used to have a runner as well, and something you might come across or already have come across is they get noted.
Yeah.
And shared.
I think whether you're betting online or in shops, if you're winning, you're going to get noted. That's just a fact of life. We have to accept that and act accordingly. Yeah, I don't think I'm at that stage yet. But yeah, there are many, many stories of having photographs taken on CCTV. I think it's a very murky legal standpoint that they're on, sharing information. I'm not a GDPR expert and data protection expert, but it seems to me that there's something not quite right in sharing images without somebody's consent. But the fact is that there are many anecdotes of that happening. So yeah, you've got to be a little bit wary of that. But it goes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago. You just have to act in a way that isn't unreasonable and make things last for as long as possible and spread things out as much as possible. There are always ways to get on. But I think, is it Tom who talks about the dark arts of professional betting? And one of them is just getting on. If you can work out how to get on on an ongoing basis, then you're more than halfway to cracking it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you have to put a bit more effort and a bit more time in at this stage than you would do earlier, as I said. And it might be something like this, how to get on, using your nous, adapting. You talk to some of the biggest bettors, someone like Tom, he adapts. So, he doesn't have accounts like perhaps many of the people listening or many of his members do. So how does he get on? He finds angles that work for him. Often it's exchanges or it's using shops. If the shop gets shut off to him, well, what does he do next? How does he find a solution to that problem? So at this stage, you do have to bear that in mind. You're going to need to think a little bit more than just open this account and hit them on early overnight prices, like some Twitter tipsters might do. I just put forward a couple more tipsters here, actually, because I know we're talking about some of the tipsters, and I put down Edward's tips. We've talked about. You can definitely follow him on the exchanges. Optimum Racing, you've spoken about. I would also venture Dimitrio Giotti, who's our European basketball tipster. He made I think 19% ROI to all Pinnacle quoted prices. And even at Pinnacle closing odds, I believe the ROI is 10%. So obviously he's ahead of the market because he's got 19%, but still there is an edge even if you took the last possible price that's traded at Pinnacle before the particular game starts. So that's available to you. I'd also venture for Skeeve, who's on Picchio, and there's a few others on Picchio too who are more expensive. But what I like about Skeeve, well, he's long-term winner, Hall of Fame winner, but he also quotes Pinnacle prices. He has a definite edge on the non-league football scene, and certainly someone you can follow. But again, you have to be working at high stakes. And if you're not someone that's going to be in position to place those bets every Saturday that he has a game at 2 p.m., well, it's not going to suit you, is it? You have to set your clock around. And there's a couple more services that I haven't referenced yet, gents, that you would like to put forward at this stage.
Yeah, SysAnalyst is one that I've been fortunate enough to be following now on the exchanges for just coming up to a month. So it's still very early days. But what I really like about that service is that it provides a minimum price to take, which is more than useful when you're looking on the exchanges. Something, Josh, you were talking about in relation to a couple of other services that on the exchange of entering the market a little later on and perhaps in the run up to the race. I can say that in the bets that I've been around for that I've been able to put on, I think only 2 out of, a lot. I couldn't begin to say how many. Only 2 horses have I not been able to get that minimum price on, which is a really good strike rate. So that, I feel, is really tailored potentially to exchange use. I know they do cater for, and originally the service was designed for those with soft bookmaker accounts, and they still record prices to a price you can get with one of the bookmaker or a number of the bookmakers as an average user price. But I'm finding it certainly very easy to access and make a profit from using Betfair and Smarkets. So that's certainly one I would be keeping a very close eye on at this stage.
Josh, any more from you?
There's 2 that we've got noted down, both recent additions to our premium section. So 2 football service, Better Minic, I never say that correctly, and AI Football. So both of these services concentrate on worldwide football, high volume, relatively low ROIs, but they lend themselves very well to bank growth. So on both service sheets, you'll be able to see 2.5% progressive investment and also a percentage of bank investment too. What you'll see there is how compounding can grow your money really, really quickly. So you're not really worried about getting a 10% ROI, for example. What you're concentrating on is getting as many bets down as you can and growing that bank from where you start from. So both those services lend themselves very well to that. And we've done quite a lot of work on them recently, and they're well worth looking at if you're at stage 4 or 5.
Yeah, absolutely they are. If I could venture forward one that we haven't talked about in this concept, I'm not sure both of you are doing this as well now, but the golf tracker, the Bookie Bashing golf tracker, which obviously is superb. We've referenced weekly golf value, which picks a selection of them each week. And one thing that Bookie Bashing have been doing for a while, and I've been using for myself, is betting on them win only. Now, it goes kind of contrary to what the tracker does because it's each way value. And then if trying to find value in the place with the enhanced terms. However, it seems there is some logic, and the results bear this out, in that it also indicates who's being supported in the win market. So I've been using a strategy, if you like, betting win only using the golf tracker, and it's been very good for me. I was checking my figures. I'm at 59% ROI. doing that. And that's based on exchange bets. And I just thought I'd have a look at bookie bashing because they've got it since they started advising the weekly golf value bookie bashing results since 2019. And theirs is 59% ROI too. Yeah. So, and that's that's 2,668 bets. I think mine is over about 1,800. I take more each week. I take about 20% of the field in terms of odds percentage chance of winning. And it's a good strategy. And it speaks to the edge, trying to find an edge, working out whereby if you can't get on it each way, is the value in other approaches. And again, it's not going to appeal to everyone. Maybe you have to be particularly hard-nosed to follow it because, you're the best will in the world. You're not going to win every week when you're betting win only on the golf. So you can have decent losing runs. I think my worst was one winning tournament from 12. I think I had maybe 10 on the bounce that lost.
I think we both shared the same thing, didn't we, earlier on this year?
Yeah, I think it was. And there was a time when there was a lot of favourites winning. John Rahm, I think he won several.
Yeah, Scotty Scheffler.
Rory might have picked up a couple. And even like Max Homer when he was quite short, when he won in California in, I think, January. So yeah, that's just the wind nature of the beast. But, if you have the bankroll, you have the time and inclination to go and work out where there's value. Sometimes you can take an existing service like this, and all the stats are published, and we'll be publishing a review about this on SBC once I get more data, is to outline that. So I should say as well, that's on the exchange and sharp bookmaker tipster page that we do have. So a lot of what we've spoken about today is already on there, isn't it, gents? So you can find out, we're trying to add some more colour to all of the listings we have on that page, but it's probably more that we haven't referenced here. And you can go and explore the reviews and the information that we have because, there's a lot of choice for at this stage, but it does take a little bit of, a bit of time, a bit of insight. From my own perspective with this golf and some of the golf stuff I do, like this particular one, in terms of an hourly rate, it works out ridiculously good for me. But then I might have 2 months when I have nothing to show for it. But I know like over the course of a year, it's going to be good. But on a purely hourly rate in terms of the performance, I think I get real good bang for my buck. So that's how I kind of evaluate strategy sometimes. It's on that basis and, how it fits in with what I do. So that's just an extra bit of insight on an existing strategy and how you can adapt it to follow. Gents, is there anything that we haven't covered on, especially this exchange, sharp bookmaker shops, big bankroll that you'd like to chuck in here?
I've got one little thought about the win only you were discussing there, Pete. Just a small change in mindset about how you're thinking about betting. So you mentioned 20% of field coverage or odds coverage. And what I would encourage people to do is think of that as a 4-to-1 shot. And what you're aiming to do is maybe hit a winner 25% of the time, and then you've got quite a big edge there, haven't you? So it's not thinking about winners in terms of each way, returns each week. It's thinking of it as like one block of bets. So you're taking out 20% of the field, but you're aiming to hit 25 or 30% strike rate, and that's where your returns will come from. It's a slightly nuanced way of thinking about the betting compared to each way.
Yeah, it's very true. It's changing your mindset with that. And I'd also add in the volume. The betting is really important. Betting volume, because often at this point you might be hitting a lower ROI. Maybe not on golf, but maybe on some other things you are taking an ROI. So the more you can get on, the more you can make. And all you got to do is look at Pinnacle for that because, they have a very low margin but high volume model. So don't be fooled by just thinking I need to make 20% or I've always made 20% ROI on racing and here I'm making 5. Well, if you can get more bets down like on that basis, I had Johnny Deneen on the podcast recently who bets in a similar fashion because he can make small amounts, lots of small amounts. He's betting every race, he's got strategies. So that's something to bear in mind is that at this stage, you might be actually betting a lot more and have more tied up, but in lots of smaller bets, which also speaks to modern day betting, doesn't it? How much you can actually get on even in an exchange sometimes.
What's the saying, Pete? Is it ROI for show, ROC for dough? Something like that?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Think of it as it's better to have a 2% edge and just back it over and over and over again and keep on compounding your money than it is having a 20% edge that you only hit every 2 months. You're actually better off with the lower ROI, but turning it over as much as you can, especially at this stage.
Yeah. And another thing is, Rowan, you might be good, well set to jump in here is the multiples. Now, because you do this on the football, and very often if I find value with the same bookmaker and it's, even if it's not really short odds, I might put them in multiples because I know those prices of value. Therefore, if I'm taking them in a multiple, I'm compounding that value. Now, I might be mindful of if I'm doing doubles, trebles, and what have you, but that's another way to find more value. And I've done this with winner odds, for example, because obviously they're quite heavily odds on. I do a lot of doubles, a lot of trebles, and I find it helps with if you're betting maybe in shops as you do, but with soft bookmakers, it helps with profits, but also it helps with longevity because those multiples sometimes are not looked on as shrewd as taking the single prices.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. I think you hit the nail on the head there, that you suddenly see when you start thinking like this and adopting this mindset, saying, right, okay, so I've got a group of bets here that I know have a positive EV, so we can compound that and take advantage of that fact. You suddenly start looking for angles elsewhere as well. So sys analysts, I know I've been talking about that, but just follow on with sys analysts for a moment. You may get on a busy day 8, 9, maybe even 10 bets, but a certain number of bets. And suddenly I'm thinking, well, okay, so I'm going to back these as singles, but yeah, let's start doubling up, trebling up, putting in a lucky 15 or lucky 31 or whatever at the shops as well, at what you know are decent prices. Then you may not be hitting the jackpot very often, but you can certainly get a really good return on investment from those. So it's a bit of a balance, isn't it? Josh, I agree 100% of what you say. As you get to this stage, really the ROI figure isn't anywhere near as important as perhaps it is when you're at stage 1, stage 2, because you're betting bigger amounts and the amount of money you're making, bottom line, is that much greater. But at the same time, you can really sort of skyrocket those returns by hitting 1 or 2 good multiple bets, even if it's only every 6 months. It can really contribute. So I think that's something that I will certainly be doing a lot more of as we move forward, and something I enjoy doing. It's also good fun, isn't it? Yes. You've got a lucky 15 and the first 2 come in. You can't help but getting excited. It doesn't matter how hard-nosed and cynical you might have become. There's still that little surge of excitement. Oh, it's today the day.
I call it pants on head. Rowan is my saying.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Every week I want to know who Josh's pants on head golfer is.
Yeah.
And who was the one that won recently, Josh? Who was the pants on head?
I can't remember. Well, Keegan Bradley won last weekend. That was a good win. There was one that was even better. So I've got 2 stages actually. I've got pants off, which is excited, and then pants on head is like I'm jumping up and down. So
I like that.
I never know if I want them to win when you tell me that.
There's an image, isn't it? It conjures.
You didn't like that video call, did you, Pete?
No. Well, I'm just glad this is an audio only podcast I'm doing. So. No, but they're all good points, and we do. It is. Obviously, we do this to make a profit, but it's enjoyable along the same in the same way. You get enjoyment from being good at what you do and the rewards of that success. And certainly, sometimes it's nice to have that excitement from multiples or lucky 15s or, the coupon strategy I used to use when I had a runner. And, when you get a 6 out of 7 and you wait for the 7th bet to come in for the really big payday, things like that or when you just log on and lazily check out what the results are, and then you see you've had a really big win. Sometimes that's quite nice because we haven't talked about the psychology, but I don't micromanage the results on this. I follow some of the golf because I enjoy it, but I certainly don't micromanage a lot of what I place. I look at it, I know the bets are a value, and then I come back to it the next time I'm available and weigh up the profit and loss in a very dispassionate way because, well, if I don't win today, that's fine. I keep doing what I'm doing and I'll win. And that will play out in the long term in my favor. But hopefully by the time you're at this stage, you won't be, living out those highs and lows and impacting your mood and some of the things that can derail punters who aren't as experienced. So
I was just going to say on what you say, Pete, I think by the time you get to stage 4 or 5, I think you need to have mastered that. Otherwise, you possibly won't reach that stage. But I think the beauty of what we've just been going throughout this whole podcast is showing that you can start from very small beginnings and just gradually learn. And as you gain an experience, you'll find that you develop your own coping mechanisms, and you realize the psychology is just as important. If I go back 10 years when I started out on this betting journey, if somebody had told me I'd be backing 150 to 1 shots on the golf win only on the exchange, I'd have thought they'd be absolutely mad because that just isn't me. Now, having been through all these stages and got there, I can act just dispassionately about that scenario, backing a long shot on a golf tournament, but big prices win only, and not get upset when I've not won anything for 5 or 6 weeks because I know it's going to turn around. And I think that journey actually helps you get there, and you need to get there. Otherwise, it's not for you, basically.
Yes, exactly. And if you're at this stage and you're risking large sums of money and it's a bit too emotional for you, then it might not be suitable to your personality or what you're going through at the moment. So that's a really good point. So gents, thank you so much for your insight today. Hopefully, as a member listening to this, we'll put this online. You'll be able to listen to it over whenever you're ready. It'd be behind the paywall. It'll be there to provide some advanced context and extra content to help you make decisions. As Rowan said as well, we all started somewhere. So although we're talking maybe a bit further along the line to perhaps some of you, we all did place our first bet. We talked in the first podcast about that, with the first tips that we followed and how we made that first leap of faith into, this particular world. So if you don't be perturbed or don't be put off if you feel in any way intimidated, please don't be. Please view it as a journey, and wherever you're at, that's fine. And hopefully we can help you at each particular stage. So if I could point you in a few more resources, do go read, obviously, the Sharp Bookmaker stuff if you're interested in stage 4 and 5. But if you're looking for bookmaker services as well, I would advocate go and have a good read, especially if you're going to pay for a service, of the reviews and the Hall of Fame ratings that we put together. The more informed you can be, the better, because not every service, as profitable as they might look, is going to be suitable for you based on your own circumstances. And go and read Rowan's blog. Bet Diary blog is there as well. That's a weekly blog with a couple of posts, which has outlined his journey since the start, from using soft bookmakers and all the different tipsters to where he is now. And you can get a good sense, an ongoing sense of the challenges and the rewards that he enjoys from that. So with that being said, I'd like to thank both Rowan and Josh for your help today, gentlemen. Any final thoughts to share with the listeners?
No, the only comment I'd reiterate is if you need any help with bookmakers, especially those that aren't odds checker, please get in touch and I'll be able to help you out with that. That advice is always open.
Yes, I extend that to just me as well, and just general on Twitter or wherever it is. You can always reach us. Rowan, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, just have a similar point. So, with the Bet Diary blog each week, I do get some queries. I'm always happy to take as many as possible. I think what we have here at the SBC is a bit of a brains trust. Are I allowed to put it like that? Does that sound a bit
Absolutely.
cocky?
Yeah.
Certainly a number of years of experience between us, shall we say.
Yeah.
So between us, I don't think there'd be that many questions that would cover a topic that we've not some experience. So yeah, always happy to help out. Stick a comment in the blog. There is a place where you can just add a comment, and I'll always get back to you. And always happy to communicate, just like Josh says.
Yep, absolutely. So if you enjoy this pod, like it's the first one we're going to do for members, hopefully we'll do more in the future, but it really depends on whether you enjoy it. So if you do, or if you'd like to suggest some changes, maybe shorter, maybe different topics, then please do get in touch and share your feedback, because without that, it's a little bit of guesswork to try and work out what people are really craving and how we can help you. But hopefully this has started off and gives you some good insight into this topic. So I'd like to say thank you to Rowan and Josh, and thank you to listening. And if you have any questions, please do get in touch. And thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you soon.